All right. Today is Friday, and that means it's time for some AI mistakes live content. I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much for showing up for the live, for those of you that are here. And I'm excited about today's content. We're going to be talking about AI news. And really, this is not news specific to today, but it's something I've been wanting to talk about for a while because there's a lot of things happening with AI and generated content, decisions that people are making about where they're going to get their news, how they learn about what's happening. And we got to talk about this decision that Microsoft made with the Microsoft News Network late last year. So, without further ado, let's dive into the AI generated content space and discuss what's happening, right? Because there's a reality to these decisions that we make. And over the last year, we've seen AI content absolutely explode. In fact, we've seen news articles, marketing, content in media going all over the place. If you've been on social media, you know there's AI content that's out there. And listen, we need to talk about this because it's affecting what we see on a daily basis. Whether you realize it or not, it is something that is happening out there. And I think it's important for us to understand what's going on. So let's start by talking a little bit about what I mean when I say AI generated content. That's everything. It's audio, it's video, it's text, it's images. Anything that is taking a non human development approach to providing the prose, the content, the verbiage, the imagery, the sound. These are all things that can be generated with AI content now. And the reality of the situation is that these capabilities are very early in terms of our familiarity with them. But let's just be honest, there's been research and development in these spaces for a very long time. This idea of AI generated content is not new. And companies have been trying to find new ways to curate and personalize and even translate the content that we make each and every day. In fact, I think if you look at historically speaking, in order to develop Google Translate, Google spent millions and millions of dollars to enable that capability. And the large language models that you and I have been learning about and playing with over the last 12 to 18 months basically have done exactly the same result of all of the work that Google Translate has been doing over the years. And it's affected my life personally because now I can communicate with people in a language that I don't speak. And I'm confident that the message is going through and that it's not getting lost. That's pretty amazing. So there's some really amazing things that AI generated content can do for us, and I really value the idea of language barriers being broken down by the generation of content in a language that's not my native tongue. I think we're going to see a lot more about that in the near term. But that's not the primary function of what I want to talk about today. What I really want to talk about is there's some key advantages that we get from using AI for content development, but there's also some things that we need to consider in terms of where is it really valuable for humans to continue to do that manual content generation? And this is something that I personally struggle with as well. If you've seen the newsletter that I put out, and if you haven't, please hit the link in the comments or below to sign up for the newsletter. I put out a monthly newsletter that talks about AI and provides tips and really valuable insights into how we can use AI and build AI systems. That AI newsletter is still 100% written by me. And there's a couple of reasons that I've chosen to continue writing that myself. One is it's a skill that I need to continue to develop and improve, but I've always done it that way. So there is an element of inertia, right? I've always done it that way, and I want to continue to do that. But it's very personal to me to be able to write each and every word and to think about it. That doesn't mean that I'm not using AI to improve the writing that I have there, but it is not generated by AI. I might use AI to summarize content, to identify what I want to talk about, to think more deeply about what it is that I am writing. And those are things that improve the quality. And I previously talked about you can use AI to actually be more authentic. The one of the key advantages, though, of AI generation is that it can speed up how quickly we can turn something out. And sometimes that is simply just providing a response. Because let's be honest, right? Sometimes we get fatigued. Sometimes we're so busy with all of the things that we're working on, being able to provide an answer that is not exactly what we would say, but captures the essence of what we want to communicate can be extremely valuable. And when it comes to content, look, if you're in the news business, being first to report is a huge advantage because it allows you to attract more of those eyeballs and have people use your platform. But there's also some impact that's there because the reality is in many cases people don't react positively to that AI content. There's something in us that feels like we can detect it. And when we feel like it's there, we actually think that content is not as good. So let's dive into this a little bit because there's been a couple of papers that have come out, and I don't want to belabor this too much, but one of the folks that I follow on Twitter X was talking about this a few weeks ago, and this is one of the reports that he cited. Now, I wasn't really aware of this report until he brought it up, so it was all new information to me. But there is actual research that has been done to look at what kind of reaction we have to AI content. And what this paper talks about was the fact that people were reacting to the presence of AI generated content differently when they knew it was AI generated content than when they didn't know it was AI generated content. And what this means is that our perception of that content changes based on whether or not we believe that content has been generated by AI. We seem to intrinsically place value on the fact that it is human generated content. Whether that is right or wrong is really up to the receiver of that message. I'll tell you what I think, though. I'm not a writer by trade, but I want to be much better at doing writing. And it takes an enormous amount of effort to develop that skill. It's also not an overnight thing. Being able to write well is something that many people have to practice for many years to get good at. One of the biggest challenges that I have in writing has always been my use of the passive voice. It's not been until I had the advent of AI tools like Grammarly where I could actually regularly identify the use of that and quickly correct it so that I could take that away as a habit in my writing. So if you went back in time and handed me an assignment for writing versus having AI generate it, even if it was an older model like, say, GPT 3.5, it's entirely possible that the writing coming out of GPT was better than my own writing because you have to do enough of it to get better. But now we have AI tools, so we can actually have it both ways. See, you can generate the content and get an answer. And if the AI content is better than what you would write, you can choose to take that. That's a choice that we make. And so, one of the positions I want to take here today is maybe what we need to be doing is identifying ways that we can leverage these tools to improve the output rather than simply abdicating the responsibility and handing it over to AI. I know that not everybody feels that way, but one of the things we've talked about in the AI space is, are you going to be replaced by AI? No, that's not most likely. What is most likely is that you will be replaced by someone that is using AI to do that job. Now, what's interesting here is that that isn't 100% the case because we've seen other results, and we'll come back to that in a minute. I want to cover another paper first before we get into the news of what Microsoft has done with their Microsoft network. Another paper came out recently toward the end of 2023. I believe it was September. And this paper is really a collection of detail around, again, how we have a response, how we have a favoritism towards human content. What's interesting, though, is that what this paper measured is that there was not an aversion to AI content, it was a preference for human content. So Is that a perception that's real? I think human bias is obviously something that really does happen and that we must consider. I actually think that there's nothing wrong with having a bias for human content. I like to produce human content myself. It's part of what I'm doing with you right now. This is all what's in my brain and what's come out over doing analysis and reading and learning over the last week to put together and bring this information to you. But I think the key here is that even this paper is calling out that if we can identify ways to combine both the human generation and the AI generation, it's actually going to be better. We can get less bias in the AI content by having the human rate the AI and by having the AI rate the human. There is no downside to combining these two things together. And, a number of years ago in the programming space, because I've been in information technology for more than 25 years, we talked about this new concept, and it was new at the time of rapid programming, rapid application development, RAD. Yeah, it's become lots of things since then, but the essence of rapid application development at the time was that you would actually take two programmers and you'd sit them side by side and they'd work on the same bit of code. And so instead of one mind generating that bit of code, you had two. So every decision was scrutinized and thought thoroughly about by both people that were seated there working on the code. The results spoke for themselves. The results coming out of that paired programming effort was almost always better than a single contributor. But here's the thing, you have to double up on the resources it takes to create that code. And sometimes the trade off just isn't there. But if we think deeply about the kind of choices that we're making, we can make a better choice for us, for our consumers, our customers, and for ourselves. And this problem isn't going away, right? Companies are making these decisions every day. And case in point, we have some news about AI generated content that we need to talk about. When we talk about generated news, look, news is everywhere, and not all of it do we even read when we do read news. But a lot of the current situation is leading organizations to believe that AI generated news is the better answer because you can get the content generated so quickly and it does a good enough job of demonstrating it. I will tell you the place where I have most often consumed AI generated news is probably in the Stocks app on my Apple iPhone because oftentimes you're looking for news that has been issued on a particular stock. Many times it is simply a readout of the technical analysis that has occurred over the last period of time because that's a pain for a human to write. Sometimes it's helpful to read that technical analysis rather than pulling out an app and doing that analysis yourself. So it does have some value and it is something that is commonly done. And I think that kind of news that is AI generated might actually have real utility and value over asking a person to have to go through and do that work. But when we talk about AI generated content, most often what we're seeing AI generated content for is three main things. The use of AI generated content in marketing is probably the number one use case that has already been widely adopted. If you are in marketing and you aren't using AI to do some of that work, let's talk because there is so much opportunity in this space. A lot of marketing is really all about what did you try? Did you get the information out there? And oftentimes, in order to try many different offers, you have to just generate offer after offer after offer. And that's really what marketing is about. You don't know what's going to resonate with the customer. So you can create different variations of that content and evaluate it with A B testing or side by side simultaneously examination deployment. Many times that will help you identify exactly the right message that is going to be successful. And that's why marketing is adopting this so often. The other space that I think is kind of interesting is product descriptions. It's so often that, we have these products that we want to share with the world, but we lack the ability to properly describe it in a way that others can understand. This has been really valuable in the US markets for non English speaking organizations to market their products on stores like Amazon. Being able to understand what the product actually does and how it works in my own language by reading the product description is an important thing. And I think that there is an interesting use case there because it solves a problem for a customer to help them properly understand the product. And then, of course, the last that we need to talk about some more is news articles, because this is a real thing. And I want to ask the question: is the AI generated news better than what comes out of a human mind? Well, here's the reality of the situation: it can be faster, it can be accurate, and it can even do so with less bias. My position, though, has always been it's not having less bias, it's choosing which bias you will take. We all have bias. The training programs that we are creating to teach these models how to answer questions, that has bias. You can't remove bias completely from the process, nor can you remove error, because humans make errors and we're using human information to train the models. And even when they're perfectly trained, error still happens. You can reduce the amount that's there. You can have better controls in place to limit the number of errors that are occurring, but I don't think you can fully take it out of the way. The other part of this is that you can decide what content is most important. Not all news content is really valuable for humans to work on. So I can absolutely see value being generated by doing AI generated content. The problem is with AI content, it doesn't have that human touch. It doesn't have that perspective of the human mind. Even if the model understands how people would describe something, it's just not the same. And I think there's a part of us that knows and understands when someone has written something versus when it's AI generated. Does that have value? I think that's the question that's going to be answered in the coming months and years. And I don't think it's been answered yet. Case in point, journalism is facing this challenge right now. If you are creating content and you work at a newspaper, that's a really challenging economic environment. The newspaper business is not the place that you want to be today. And we have case after case after case of agencies and newspapers that are not able to survive the business environment simply because the subscriptions are what drive their sustainability, and they are consistently losing subscriptions, in part because they are competing with other media companies that are generating that content at a lower price. And this is where we need to talk about what's happening in the space today. This article, written in November of last year, talks about how Microsoft is replacing staff with AI. And this is now out in the open. This is a decision that has been made. What's even more interesting about what's happened here is there is a constant level of debate around whether or not they've actually done the right thing. But when you talk to the people that were involved with this, they are committed to the decision that they made and they are not backing out of that decision. But I think the numbers are what's driving some of this decision making. We make a lot of light of data analytics in the space for AI because it is really enabling leaders to make better decisions by using massive amounts of data to build dashboards and insights, to really think deeply about a problem using the data that we have. And the data that we have right now shows that content automation is a thing. It is not going away. And in fact, I think one of the biggest challenges in the generated news space is that the value, the quantity, the quality of the generated AI content today is the worst it will ever be. It's only going to get better. So this problem is not going away. And I think we're going to see that there are increasing efficiencies that organizations are gaining by using these processes. But if you look in the right places, you'll see that when compared, people tend to prefer the human generated content over the AI generated content. So what does that mean for organizations like MSN? That means that It depends on what we decide to do. I mean, we can decide whether or not to read that content. And I think this is something that is essential for us to examine. Now, you've probably seen some of my previous content, and you might know that I'm a huge fan of Perplexity. It drives a lot of the research and work that I do every day. I really, really enjoy using Perplexity. It's one of my favorites, honestly. And what we see with Perplexity is that they have a discover capability. So, what will happen is there will be a news story or there will be something that many people are searching for, and you can go hit the discover tab on Perplexity and it will show you the news. And in fact, when you click on one of these links, it will do an AI generated write up of the situation. And there's a couple of things that are happening here. One, when I use Perplexity, I'm making a clear decision. I am deciding to read an AI generated story about the thing that I want to learn about. So I'm choosing to consume the AI content over what's written by the human. That's a choice that I'm making. Even if the content that is covered is actually written by a human, having that information translated through multiple other sources and run through the large language model means I'm getting the AI version of that story, right, wrong, or indifferent. And it is entirely possible that when I choose to do that, I'm getting a hallucination. And that hallucination is there could be ancillary things that have been injected into that response that are not accurate. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it depends on how important that news story is for you. In my case, I think a lot of the news that I'm consuming is understanding the general idea, the gist, the primary outline or summary of what it is that's going on. That's really what I'm interested in most of the time. We all have a news funnel that we are using. Some stories matter more to you than others. And if you just want to get a quick idea of what's going on, the large language model summary of that problem could actually be more useful, have a higher degree of utility. And so that's part of what's driving my behavior. But the other part of it is if you are consuming the content that is generated by AI and the numbers bear that out for the companies that are providing those services, can you blame them for choosing to provide that as a service if it costs them less to provide it as an AI written story versus a human generated story? I mean, look, let's be honest. If you have to choose between an ad laden site that's written by a human or an AI generated one that doesn't have ads or has very few ads, which do you think is better? And which one will you actually use? I mean, it's on the table. You can see here what I'm choosing. I'm choosing the AI written without ads because today Perplexity is a pay service for me. So I'm actually paying for them to do this. But generally speaking, there are no ads that are getting brought in. And this is something that is part of our commercial environment, right? Part of being able to run a business means that you're creating value and you have to create value one way or another. Ads are one of those things that is creating revenue that allows them to pay for the human to do the work. And let's just be honest, there's no news agency in the world that is getting enormously rich off of writing content for the internet. It's just not a terribly common thing. I'm sure it's possible to make money. We have a few well-known news organizations around the world that are doing okay, but part of the consolidations that's happened in television news, in newspapers, is they are getting bought up and consolidated across the world because it's not sustainable to have a local newspaper anymore. They're just not generating enough ad revenue to sustain paying a large staff. Okay, so with that said, I mean, here is the state of things today. Google has added their generative AI to their search results. So when I'm going to go look at the news and I search for latest AI news, it's going to give me a generative answer just like I would get from Perplexity. But if you look at the search results, the very first result that is provided by the search engine is a sponsored link. Why? Because that's how Google makes their money. It's all about that sponsorship, someone paying to have a chance to be in front of your eyeballs. This is the stark reality that we're going to have to contend with. I, where does it end? I don't know. I don't have that answer. and we're going to have to decide in how we behave what the outcome is going to be. So, we've talked a little bit about some of the things that are there. We've done some pros and cons. Look, there are limitations that we need to consider, and I think this is probably the biggest thing that I want to express to you and share with you from an AI mistakes perspective. Because at AI mistakes, the goal is to help people learn from the mistakes that are made so that they can grow and improve, not limit themselves by being afraid of making those mistakes, but also prevent making the unnecessary mistakes that we've already learned from what others have done. And look, this is where we are. In order to use this technology, we have to understand that today it may not be the right thing for everybody because it lacks the error detection, it lacks the full context of understanding, and it just doesn't have the emotional depth. Let's just be honest. It's not there today. It's continuing to get better. And if you're playing with the most recent models, I don't know, maybe you've had a chance to play with Gemini or GPT-4 and you've seen some things that you were like, wow, I can't believe it was able to do that. From a creativity perspective, I've seen some pretty incredible things. It's just not happening with content that is factual or nonfiction. So I want to call that out. Before we go on, the other thing I want to share with you is when we think about human generated content, there is so much human generated content that we have available today, we probably can't read it all. So we don't have a shortage of human content. You can always find human content if you go looking for it. But today, we have a couple of really common large language model solutions that we can use to get the news. So, in putting together some of the content for today's discussion, I did some interesting experiments. This was partially frustrating and partially exciting to me because we're at a point now. Google just yesterday released their Gemini offering, their advanced Ultra 1.0 model and renamed Bard. So I have a new place that I can go and ask questions, interact, and learn with a high level, well developed model. Many of the benchmarks and the results are coming back and saying that Google's new engine that they just released is equivalent to ChatGPT 4. And Microsoft, of course, built their enterprise offering. Their Copilot offering uses ChatGPT based GPT-4 from OpenAI. In some ways, Copilot and ChatGPT compete with each other. The results are not identical. There are things that Microsoft is doing on top of OpenAI's GPT-4 model to customize and or improve the content that's coming out of that. So we have a lot of interesting things that are happening, but one of the frustrations I've had in trying to put together these kinds of presentations for you is, ChatGPT has been the leader for the better part of a year. And if you go into ChatGPT and you start asking it about itself, the answers you get are really terrible. In fact, I can tell you how many times I've asked ChatGPT about ChatGPT, and it basically says, I'm not going to give you an answer. It kind of refuses to. What's interesting is that I saw a very similar kind of behavior across the board, across Copilot, across Gemini, across ChatGPT. If you ask it about itself, something happens. It's blocked, it's prompted, it's set up in such a way that it cannot answer the question. And this is something that's distinctly different about humans. You can ask a human to self evaluate. Now, you might get a bald faced lie, but I think that many of us, when asked to do self reflection, are capable of delivering somewhat of a realistic summarization of our own behavior. Trying to do that with a large language model today just doesn't happen. And here's some examples of what I'm talking about. When I wanted to dig into this situation with what happened with Microsoft, I started asking questions of the large language models. Hey, tell me about this thing with MSN changing to AI written content. And when you look at this answer that Copilot gave, it didn't answer the question. It basically sidestepped the entire thing. It says in 2020, there was a report about Microsoft choosing AI to manage news production for MSN, replacing human editors with AI systems to curate news story. So that is partially accurate, right? But that also doesn't tell the full story. So they're very selective in the answer. And I think some of that is driven out of the commands that are given to the model. Now, I had something that was a little bit more interesting happen with ChatGPT. The first time I asked it, it said, well, yeah, there was this thing in 2020, but then I can't really answer the question. There was a problem. Was that a filtering issue? Was that a prompting issue? Or was it just that the search failed? Honestly, any of those outcomes for me is not great. So I hit generate the response again. I did get a much better answer this time, and it was a more accurate description of what was going on. There were no dates involved, and it didn't give any kind of criticism for choosing to go that route at all. So then I had to go and ask Gemini. And when I asked it, a really interesting thing happened. And this is part of the new discovery that I'm having using Gemini. I've been using it for less than 24 hours, but I thought this was kind of interesting. The first answer it gave was, oh, well, actually, that's not really a thing. It's not true that MSN did that. And I was like, yeah, that's not right. This happened. This is a real thing. Well, here's the cool and slightly unnerving part of the discussion. Google now has a button for each response that allows you to double check the response. So I clicked the double check button, and what it does is it feeds the response back into the system and then it evaluates it. So you're able to, with a single click, ask the Google engine to self reflect and check its own answer. And the answer it came back with, oh, wait a minute. Some of it's true and some of it's not. The green highlighted text has been validated, and the red text is something that it found that was incorrect. And in the case of this first one, if you click the little bubble with the exclamation point on it, it gives you additional content that actually fixes the answer. So it actually did discover, yes, Microsoft did fire human journalists and replace them with AI that publishes news. And in the case of MSN, not only did they replace it, but it turned out news that was not accurate. And this was a real decision that Microsoft made. And this is the most detail that I got out of any of the large language models. But oddly enough, it was not the first answer. I had to ask it to sort of self reflect and check all the answers before we actually got to this answer that was sourced from a news site. Now, if you've been out on the internet reading the news, you know that futurism tends to be a little on the sensational side, but this is a truthful statement. They did, in fact, fire their human journalist, and the AI did, in fact, print news that was not 100% accurate. So this is all real. And what's interesting is when you read the full response, it got some of it right, and then it got some of it wrong. Now, what the second exclamation point on this page, where there hasn't been a major recent announcement of this kind specific to MSN, is not accurate, right? But it didn't provide any details. It just basically acknowledged that that wasn't true. So here's the thing: when we talk about this kind of situation, what's better? Because I'm here thinking about which of these models do I want to continue to pay for? Which ones are giving the best answers? What is the best solution for us in identifying what solutions are the right large language model for building our answers, for building our systems? And we've seen benchmarks, we've had personal experiences. I think, honestly, we're going to have to continue to deal with this problem. There's not going to be a clear answer. There's not going to be a clear winner anymore. The days of ChatGPT being the hands down, this is the right answer, it's all you need, I think are coming to an end. And what's even more interesting about Google having released Gemini now is Google is the search engine company. They know when you're looking at the content from a search engine optimization standpoint, people have been working to optimize their websites for many years. In fact, in the early days when I was a web developer, I put a lot of effort into engineering the content so that it would get noticed and ranked well by Google. When you've created a large language model and put that in the hands of customers to generate content, look, everybody knows that blogs are being written with this content. Everybody understands that today you can go work with a company and it can generate you a hundreds of pages website that talks about anything and everything and provides advice. But here's the thing, is that really providing value for anybody? And I think the answer is largely no, because it's not new information. It is simply sharing the same set of information in one place. Is that a convenience? Is that a value to the consumer? I think in some cases it could be. So it's not a zero sum game. The problem is that companies are doing this to improve their search engine optimization ranking, and that only gets you so far. If you've been in the SEO game, you know it is not a long-term operation. You're always going to have to continue to optimize the content. And not only do you have to optimize it, you have to optimize it for your reader to get value out of it. And that is ultimately why when I started AI Mistakes and I came up with the coursework for the AI Mistakes Business Professional course, it's about creating value. It's not enough to use AI, because when we go to work each and every day, we have to create value with the work that we do. And if we're not creating value with the work that we do, someone's going to notice and things are going to change, whether it's today or tomorrow or 10 years from now. That will be called to account. If you're not creating value with the work that you're doing, people are going to notice and things are going to change. So when we talk about SEO, you can spend a lot of time on SEO and it reduces the amount of time. It reduces the financial investment. But here's the thing, if it doesn't help somebody make a better decision, it's not going to matter. You might get a temporary win with a better search placement. You might get a temporary win by getting more eyeballs on your site because you're covering something that people are interested in. But if you're not sustaining the value creation with that, it's not going to go anywhere. So you need to put that into the calculation as you're thinking about, is AI generated content the right answer? And I want to be clear, AI generated content might be the right answer in some places. For me, using Perplexity to get those news reports is really valuable. And one of the reasons that I like to use Perplexity is that it isn't a single large language model sourced solution. In fact, Perplexity is building their own large language model that they are using. And when I went to complete the discovery of what happened with MSN, of course, I went to Perplexity and I looked it up, and it pulled in a whole bunch of external links, very much likely written by a human covering the issue. And this, I really felt like, was the best answer. I really liked what I was getting here. And what's interesting is that it even pulled in the more recent items. So this answer far and away was better than all of the answers that I got out of the large language models. And this is part of the reasons why I won't shut up about Perplexity, because it just creates value for me. It is a valuable solution. It saves me time. It gives me the right answer. Does it have hallucinations? Sure, it does happen. But also, it makes it really easy to look at the external sources and continue the conversation. And that is a valuable thing for me. Is it always going to be that way? I don't know. Probably not. But Perplexity is not sitting around. None of them are. So who benefits? We do, the consumer, because I get to choose who I'm going to work with. Now, this takes us to one of the other interesting situations that has developed with AI content generation. I spend a lot of time on social media. If you are watching me on LinkedIn right now, you know that I'm posting every day. If you're watching me on YouTube, you know that I am doing this every week to provide insight, help people make decisions, and choose the right actions when it comes to deploying AI. If you've joined me on X, you know that I'm regularly posting content, reposting, and sharing what others have put out there. All of those social media networks create value for me. That's why I spend time on those platforms. And that's not something that I take lightly. Every day I decide to post another thing on YouTube or LinkedIn or X, because I think it creates value. I get a lot of value on all of those platforms. I spend time both as a creator and a consumer of those platforms. And so this is something that is really relevant to me. Now, I paid for the LinkedIn upgrade because, again, I'm getting value from that platform. But one of the things that they sell you in becoming a LinkedIn premium user is you can draft messages with AI. Now, the truth is, I tried this once. I didn't like the answer I got out of it. Honestly, if I'm contacting a recruiter about a job, I'm not letting the AI write that and clicking send. That's never going to happen. I'm going to make sure that message is 100% accurate, 100% represents me. Now, I'll use the AI generation just to see what it says to help me think about my thoughts and put them together in a reasoned case. When I do this, I want it to be the best. And if I can click a button and have it help me make my answer better, then I'm going to do that. Where it doesn't add value, as Seha really calls out here, right? If you have somebody that's dropping AI comments into your thread, that's not great, honestly. And it happens. Sometimes it's not easy to tell, sometimes it's blatantly obvious. And that's not creating value for anybody, right? We want to have a conversation on social media. And if you're not doing that, if you're dropping AI generated content, people are going to notice that. And it's going to change the equation for you in the value you're getting out of that social network. And then Rachel's comment here, I think it resonated with me. I responded to it. I think when we think about all of the ways that we can use AI generated content, look, social media posts aren't it. Okay. Comments are not the place to use this. You want to have a conversation with a human being, not an AI. If you wanted to do it with AI, you would have gone to Chat GPT in the first place. So just think about how you're going to use it and act accordingly. There are right and wrong answers today. It may not always be that way. I mean, just because I get on here and say you shouldn't be using it for comments doesn't mean there's not a new service that's going to launch today, this afternoon, that is adding value with AI generated comments. The point here isn't a hard and fast rule. The point is think it through and make sure that whatever you're doing with the AI, that it is creating value. That is how you know it's the right thing. Now, the last one I want to talk about for AI generated content, we talked a little bit about the marketing discussion. But the other one that's kind of close to my heart right now is sales, because if you're trying to run a business, you can have the best content in the world, but if you're not making the sale, it doesn't matter. So I've looked into this, and there is a platform that I am currently evaluating that includes the use of AI for sales. And here's what the data shows us. You can use AI to close a sale. It absolutely does work. But here's the catch. You don't convince a lead to buy with a bot. What you can do is put the link in front of somebody that does want to buy with a bot. And you can answer frequently asked questions with a bot. Make it easier for them by taking some of the friction out of the transaction, but you're not going to convince them. I'm not going to send you a text message by bot and convince you that my course is the right thing for you. Nor do I want that to be the case, because there isn't any AI in the world right now that can be better at having that human conversation. And a huge part of my online course is having the human conversation. It's about learning from me, not just the content that's in the course. It's about us working together and talking through what it is that creates value for you. So don't forget about that. But it can absolutely initiate an outreach. You can absolutely ask a question. Is this something you are interested in? And someone can answer that question. And then you can follow up with that lead in person to have a human discussion, to build a relationship, to build a deal that's going to work for both sides. Negotiation is also an important part of that human interaction. But HBR studied this, and they gave the classic IT consultant answer of, well, it depends. And the it depends is, don't close the sale with AI. Get to the lead conversation with AI by discovering who wants to learn more about your solution. So here's the thing. To kind of close out the discussion, AI generated content is a thing. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. It does have a place, and that place is not everywhere. But I do think the use cases are going to expand. But if you're in marketing and you're not learning about AI, that's a mistake. Don't make that mistake. AI is a tremendously valuable resource for building and trying out content. So don't pass up the opportunity to make that happen. Use it to save yourself some time. Look, the age of lorem ipsum in creative content now is thankfully done, because you can quickly go and generate something that is better than lorem ipsum. Is it going to be great? Is it going to be the final product? Likely, no, it's not. But it is definitely an advantage to be able to drop some content in there. And for me, it solves the white page problem, the writer's block problem of, I don't know what I want to write about this. What does the AI think? And then it gives you something to argue with because I have an opinion and sometimes it just has to be drawn out because I'm not sure where to start. Now, I don't have time to dive into the avatar discussion today, but I did want to bring this up. And look, if you're interested in this topic, I'd love to hear from you. In fact, if you're watching live and you have a question, don't hesitate. Drop one in the comments. I'd love to take live questions from you if you do have any. But this thing about AI generated content is not done. We have audio and podcasts, we have video and television and cable news. Look, I watch a ton of YouTube, and I know I have seen more than one AI generated YouTube video. This concept of having someone read the story to you with video in the background is a thing, but the avatars are coming. This has already happened, and maybe we save this for another meeting later. There are many companies that are building the capability to do exactly this. In fact, one of them that I've played with recently allows me to take my face and my voice and plug it in and have it do the job for me. And this is where I have to talk about my own personal journey in using AI. Here's the thing. When I look at what the AI gives me, whether it's an avatar, whether it's the audio, whether it's the content in Chat GPT, I have a bias. I don't like the AI generated version. I want it to be mine because it's a moment of pride. It is a moment of pride for me to be able to get in front of this camera and have this conversation with you. And it's me, it's all me. Every word that I've spoken to you came from me, went through my mind. Whether or not I absorbed it from a large language model to get there is irrelevant, but it is me here in front of the camera having this conversation. It is me writing the newsletter. It is me writing the email when you are expressing interest in the online course. It is me coming up and showing up to talk about doing an AI audit or implementing AI for your organization. Because I think that's where the real value is, and it is a spiritual thing for me as well about creating value and serving one another. It is an honor to serve, and that is what I like to do. Is it possible to use these AI solutions to augment that process? Yes. But I think that's where the line needs to be drawn. And we need to give people the opportunity to say, I don't want the AI, I want the human. And we should be able to give that to them. I don't think that that's too much to ask, and I think there is value to be generated there. Look, if you've ever gotten a robocall, you know how frustrating it can be to be asked a question and them not actually care about the response. And that was part of what prompted this discussion this week. It turns out that the FCC has actually created a new rule that outlaws using AI to mimic a person without their express permission for any purpose on a call. So, whether or not AI is a thing and whether or not it should be used, people are doing it. Organizations are doing it. They're making the mistake of using that AI generation to do whatever it is that they want to do, whether it is intended to trick someone or to actually commit a transaction. We know these things are happening, and we need to keep talking about what we do in the systems that we build and the systems that we use and how we behave each and every day, because ultimately there's a feedback loop and we have control. The thing about all of this AI that's becoming available to us is that we make a decision every day on how we're going to use it. We make a decision every day if we are going to abdicate our responsibility in choosing the solutions that we believe are right for people, in advocating for solutions that we do not believe or that we do believe are right for people. I actually sincerely believe the right course of action for us each and every day is to think deeply about the value that we're creating and about the people that we are serving. And if we do that, then the right things are going to happen. It doesn't mean that we're not going to make mistakes. It doesn't mean that we're not going to choose to build an AI system that doesn't serve that purpose. But if we're always elevating that service, if we're always elevating the value creation, we're going to find the right answer. And that's what's important. That's the lesson I want to share with you all today. I hope you're doing great. I hope you're enjoying the content. If you like what I'm sharing here, please let me know. Let me hear from you. I say in the newsletter, I read every response, and I really do mean that. It's all me. I'm running the entire show here. I love hearing from you, and I want to learn more about you and what it is that you're interested in so that I can serve you and create real value for you. So let me hear from you. And if you're enjoying it, please like my content. Reach out to me if you have a question. Go make some AI mistakes.